Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing my Pantone or paint chip inspired ink swatches, and I have to say I cannot take responsibility for this idea. I actually copied my friend Heather Meeson. I'm going to link you to her in the description below, but I asked her if I could share this idea for ink swatching, and she said yes, go ahead. Now, the other thing I cannot take credit for is this kind of overall general idea to begin with. This comes from Jennifer McGuire's idea for ink swatching, and I'm going to link you over to her blog where you will find her original ink swatch video, the downloads for these templates, as well as links to the supplies like the page protectors and the rings and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, I really love this style of ink swatch for a few different reasons. Number one, you get a big, bold area of color, and you can really see how these inks stamp as you are creating your ink swatches. But keep in mind, there are some times when they don't kind of come out just perfect, and you're looking at one right here. I'm pointing that out to you. If you are super type A about your ink swatches, you may want to give this a try on one or two different types of ink before you decide to go this route. Now, I like it because this gives me a good idea of how this is really going to stamp over a large area. And I definitely saw that some of my inks did better than others. And over on my blog, I'm going to talk about a few of these inks that I really like and the reasons I like them just briefly in the description. I'm going to link you to some of my favorite inks in the description below, so be sure to check there. Now, the other reason that I really like these, in addition to seeing how my inks really stamp, you can see the distress oxides. I don't always get the best results with those, and my ink swatches kind of tell me that. But the reason I like these is because you can take two colors and put them directly up next to each other and really see how they play off of each other. Now, if you want a perfect ink swatch, and I'll show you this later on in the video, you can definitely double stamp your inks, but keep in mind that is going to darken and deepen that color. So a single stamp is going to give you a different color than a double stamp. Now, here is a look at the download that is offered over at jennifermcguireink.com, and it is customizable. You can download it in a PDF format, or you can download it in a Word format, which is what I'm using here. And I am just going to take and I am going to type in my company name. That is all in lowercase, and the ink name is all caps. So I'm just kind of keeping consistent with the template here. And you're going to notice that I'm just copying and pasting the company name from each box to the next box. Now, be careful because you can accidentally move these boxes as you go to click in them. So be careful and be mindful of that because you want everything to kind of line up. Now, you're going to see here, I just kind of moved that. So all I did was hit Control Z or Command Z on my Mac and undid that little move and then clicked back into the box again and started typing and pasting my company name. Now, if you wanted to, you could definitely change the font or change up how you do this, but I liked the consistency of it, and so I just went ahead and kind of went with it. Now, once I'm done typing in this full sheet, I'm going to go ahead and save it, and then I'm going to print it. And I am going to link to the printer that I use because it has a rear feed, and you're going to see me go to Media and Quality here and change this to feed from the rear tray. And the reason that this works really well is because I am printing on Neenah Solar White cardstock. It is a very heavyweight cardstock, and you can definitely print it on the 110-pound Neenah Solar White. But this rear feed really makes it easy to print on some thicker materials. So I'm just going in here and doing my second page of ink colors, and then I'm going to go through and I am going to print this again. So I'm just going up to File, Print, and from my Media and Quality, I am going to select rear feed from that. And if you want to, you can hit best quality. You probably don't need to do that. And I've printed these out on the Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. So this is what it looks like when it's printed out. Now, because my printer has a rear feed, it is very flat and straight when it comes out. It is not curled. And I wanted to mention, I like to print these out on the Neenah Solar White because that is what I use most to stamp. So that's going to give me the most accurate results. Now, on these downloads from jennifermcguireink.com, you're going to notice that there are instructions and it tells you exactly what to do on the side of the sheet, but I'm going to show it to you here. Now, some sort of wire guide or aluminum rail trimmer is really going to be your friend because you're going to be able to see exactly where you're cutting. And you're going to do your horizontal cuts first. So you can see I'm lining up the two little black tick marks with the rail of my trimmer, and I'm cutting from one side to the other. And you will notice I'm actually moving my blade in just slightly from the right edge of this cardstock so that I don't cut these strips completely. You can cut the strips completely. I just find it easiest if I just bring it in about 1/8 of an inch or so that it doesn't cut these strips completely through to the other side. So when you've done all of your horizontal cuts, and I like to flip this one around to get that last one, this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have these strips that are still attached. Then you need to make your vertical cuts. And just like you did before, you're going to line up the tick marks that are printed on this template with the rail or the wire guide of your trimmer. So there's one on the bottom, you can see it here. And then there's one on the top. So you just want to make sure those are both lined up with your aluminum rail. And I like to cut always with my blade coming from the bottom up. I find that when I do that, it doesn't pull these strips apart as much. It kind of pushes them in to the guide that's at the top, and I get better cuts. Now, as I'm cutting off these first 2x2 inch squares, I am going to stack them up on the right side of my trimmer. This just helps me keep them all in order. So when I'm going through and stamping these colors, I'm not looking for the correct little swatch piece. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is you want to hold this rail or this plastic guide really firmly. That's going to also get you the best cut on these little swatches here. If you are not holding it firmly and if you are not going from the bottom to the top, you might notice that your little horizontal strips kind of want to pull apart and separate, and you don't get as clean of a cut. So once I have them all stacked up, I'm going to take these little mini stacks and I'm going to stack them on top of each other because this is the order that I actually have my inks in. They're ready to stamp, and I don't want to be searching for the right swatch as I go through and stamp my ink swatches. So I'm going to go ahead and cut apart my other sheet of ink swatches here, and I'm going to set those aside, and I'm going to show you my trick. And my trick to these Pantone ink swatches is actually the back side of this stamp here, and it is from the Essentials by Ellen Winterscapes stamp set. Now, you could use any large solid area stamp with a straight edge, and I am going to link to the My Favorite Things mirror image stamp because that would also work really well for these swatches. But this is what I actually used to create all of my swatches, was the back side of this stamp here. So I'm going to line this up where it's kind of bleeding off the edge of these ink swatch cards that I've created. And keep in mind that the actual side that you normally use to stamp is facing up towards the lid of my Misti, and the back side of this stamp is actually touching my paper right now. Now, I did make a little mark on my Misti with a permanent marker. It will come off with a little bit of alcohol here so that I know where to line up my little 2x2 square each time. And I'm going to slide a piece of scratch paper into my Misti to protect the mouse pad that I use inside of my Misti. Because I'm not using a disposable grid paper in my Misti, I wanted to protect that surface. Now I'm placing another piece of scrap paper behind the stamp that's on the lid of my Misti. Remember, I'm using the back side of this stamp. And that's just so that you can see me inking up. Now, this stamp has been so used and so loved that it is very stained. And that's okay. I'm just making sure that between every color, I'm cleaning it really well. And we're going to talk more about that in just a second. So I've inked it up with my first color, and then I stamped it onto my 2x2 swatch card here. And there is my first ink swatch. These are really easy to create, and if you get all of your printing and cutting done, it's great to put on a YouTube video or a movie in the background and just go to town. So between each color, I'm going to clean with a baby wipe, and then I'm going to wipe it with a microfiber cloth. I find that this cleans it really well, especially if I'm staying within the same family. So if I'm going from a light pink to a dark pink, this seems to be plenty of cleaning. Now, I'm going to speed up the video here, and I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about this. I did have some of my ink pads that needed to be re-inked, and I haven't re-inked them yet. And this is one of those here. And you're going to see that when I stamp it, it has kind of a little bare area in it, and that's just because my ink pad's a little dry. So I went ahead and double stamped that one. Keep in mind, like I mentioned before, if you are going to double stamp these ink, you're going to get a deeper, darker color than you will with a single stamping. So just kind of keep that in mind. I would recommend kind of keeping it consistent. If you're going to single stamp all of them, and live with a little bit of imperfection. If you're going to double stamp all of them, just know that all of your inks are double stamped, and so you have a more vibrant or darker, richer color from each of these ink pads. Now I am switching from like a yellow to a green, and this yellow has a lot of orange in it, and I wanted to make sure this stamp was really clean. So I'm going to wipe it with a baby wipe first, and then I'm going to take my microfiber cloth, and I'm going to spray some of the Hero Arts Ultra Clean on it. This is a great stamp cleaner. It's safe for your clear stamps. I'm just going to spray it right onto the towel or this microfiber cloth and wipe my stamp to get it really nice and clean. Now, once I do that, I'm going to flip this cloth over. I'm going to wipe it with the dry side, and this may be going a little overboard here, but if you know me, I tend to go a little overboard. And once I've dried it off, I'm going to wipe it with a baby wipe again and wipe it with the dry cloth again. The reason that I do that is because the Hero Arts Ultra Clean tends to be a little bit greasy, and I want to make sure I have all of that residue off of the stamp before I ink it up with another ink. I want to make sure I'm going to get a nice true color each time I stamp. By the way, I am stamping with the Catherine Pooler inks today, and I find that these clean really well off of my stamps. I didn't get a lot of cross-contamination. They stamp really nice and smooth. And Catherine Pooler inks have a really nice range of color as well. So I just wanted to kind of let you watch my process here. This actually goes rather quickly. This is the Catherine Pooler Meant to Be ink. It is one of my favorite colors of ink, like of all the lines. So I think I mentioned that over in my blog post as well. So here's a look at my ink swatches when they're done. These are not all of my ink swatches. These are just the ones that I did today using my Catherine Pooler inks. And I'm going to bring in the reds and the pinks and the yellows so that you can see them all kind of next to each other and really get a feel for these ink swatches when they're completed. Now, as I mentioned before, I think an ink swatch like this gives you a really good idea of how your inks stamp when you stamp them. It gives you this really nice bold line of color, and it allows you to see the colors up next to each other without any white space so that you really know how the colors are going to play off of each other when you stamp them next to each other on your card project. So a lot of times when I'm putting together a palette of ink colors that I want to use, I can grab the colors out that I think I want to use and put them up next to each other and make any substitutions, and I know ahead of time what I'm going to get. Now, I do find that swatching your inks is really helpful because a lot of the companies, a lot of the ink manufacturers, I understand it's very difficult to get a true color on the top of the ink pad, like printed on the ink pad, that actually represents the ink that is inside. So I do recommend swatching your ink pads, even if you're not going to swatch them using this method, that's fine. But having a good representation of how they stamp is really important when you're putting together color palettes. Now, speaking of color palettes, I wanted to show you this little binder that I have in my craft room. These are half sheets of Neenah Solar White cardstock. They're cut to 5.5 by 8.5, and they are in this little Avery mini binder that I bought at Target a long time ago. I have little page protectors in there. But if I come across a color palette that I really like, I will stamp it out and kind of keep it in this binder. And on a lot of these color swatches, you're going to see Copic marker colors written beneath. That is what I often do when I'm creating with a palette, if I'm creating multiple projects with the same palette. And I think I may want to color some images but stamp others. This is a really good way for me to kind of see it all together and make sure that the Copic marker colors actually relate back to the stamp colors that I'm using. And by keeping it in this little binder, it's just a quick reference guide for me. And you can even see on some of these palettes, I have some washi tapes that I used with these palettes and that sort of thing. And in the front of this book, I also keep some Copic marker combinations that I really like. So I hope that's a helpful idea for you as well. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in this video in the description at YouTube, but head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, some information on my favorite ink brands, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thanks for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss any of my card making and paper crafting video tutorials here. And don't forget to turn on those notifications as well. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.